Meghan really is a great tool for representing a modern royal family, but not long after that tour did Meghan sort of do her doe-eyed crying to the camera and say, nobody knows how hard it is. And then off they went to Canada, then America, and have decided really that they miss it and clearly want to continue doing it. So have flown, right, talking about people who are always on their game, especially when it comes to trying to drum up support and get content for their next Netflix project. The Duke and Duchess of Montecito, Harry and Meghan, have gone on a, well, let's say a quasi-royal tour of Nigeria. They certainly haven't been meeting President...
They're not there on the behalf of the British government. They're there at the invitation of the Nigerian government. Some people think that this is a bit risky. You know, when you're not there on behalf of say, the British Home Office, you're kind of at the whims of your host. And there is concerns that maybe Harry and Meghan could be, they like to control.
This is a pattern for her. It's not about charity. It's about her image. Disaster opportunists, which is exactly right. Disaster tourists.
There are government employees that are still waiting for paychecks, back paychecks months ago.
Yeah.
You know, what are the odds that they're going to get paid quickly for this Harry and Meghan visit?
Wanting to exploit their royal titles, I think it stinks. And I think what King Charles should do, he should just strip them of the titles. Let them go off and be, celebrities. That's fine. But don't do it in the name of our royal family.
We're in America now, and we don't give a shit about you. You're not our fucking prince. You'll never be king. We hate your wife. Stay at home in your $29 million mansion, all right? This is the same woman who said, I never even considered my blackness until the British tabloids started to make a thing out of it. Now she's like, I am Nigeria. Fellow women, hear me roar.
To be honest, and very, very entitled.
Harry and Meghan, they have an issue when it comes to their memory and when it comes to the truth. She is relentless, she is shameless, and she is exhausting. You are not a successful female entrepreneur.
Meghan Markle and Prince Harry may no longer be working royals, but their recent trip to Nigeria looked very much like a royal tour of their own.
They were once the darlings of the global stage, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, the modern, rebellious royals who walked away from the crown and promised to change the world. They left the palace behind, called out the monarchy, and rewrote the rules of royal fame. And just when it seemed like their global influence was fading, they picked a new stage, Nigeria.
She was an actress, she's not anymore. She basically travels around the world, smiling and making sort of, happy faces and meeting people.
But what was supposed to be a warm, emotional return to Meghan's so-called ancestral roots turned into something else entirely, a public humiliation.
So many of the locals are enraged over the fact that their government is going to be paying for the security of Harry and Meghan.
Nigeria, the very country they hailed as their second home, slammed the door in their faces. No invitations, no ceremonies, no warm welcome, just a cold, calculated rejection, straight from the nation's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And it wasn't subtle, it wasn't maneuvering, it was a direct message that shocked everyone. You're not welcome here.
Harry and Meghan, I don't know if this is a royal tour, they're not working royals, but they're not politicians or pop stars. What exactly are they doing touring Nigeria in the first place, Kinsey?
But why would one of Africa's most powerful nations publicly shut down two of the world's most famous figures? Why now? And more importantly, what really happened during their first visit that left such a bitter taste? Because this isn't just about royal drama. This is about image versus intent, cultural pride versus celebrity ambition, and how two people who once redefined the monarchy might now be redefining how fast global goodwill can collapse.
Nigerians were thinking, well, this is a bit of a waste of public money. This is not like we're courting a state that can help us with resources. This is kind of like a faux royal couple that are there to kind of boost their images.
Let's dive in. When news broke that Harry and Meghan were planning a return visit to Nigeria, it should have been a feel-good headline. Their first tour, filled with dancing, traditional garb, and smiling photo ops, had been framed as a cultural celebration. But behind the scenes, something had shifted. And when the couple's team reached out to Nigerian officials, they didn't get a polite delay or even a vague excuse. They got something much more savage. Not welcome.
For one reason, to get their faces back on camera and to improve their image. They want people to think well of them, so they decide, what they really need? Us. What they need is us.
That's right. Nigeria said no. No event invites, no official meetings, no second royal-style tour. And this wasn't just an informal snub. This came directly from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, a loud and deliberate rejection from one of the continent's most influential governments. Why? Why? Because this time, Nigerian leaders weren't buying what the Sussexes were selling.
For the basketball court, I just think that all they do is talk, and very little action.
The first visit had already stirred controversy, with critics calling it a PR stunt wrapped in royal nostalgia. But a second visit? That raised red flags. Big ones. Government insiders revealed the decision wasn't made lightly. It was coordinated, strategic, and supported by multiple departments, including foreign affairs, culture, and even security. Their conclusion? The Sussexes brought no value, no cultural respect, and no meaningful investment. Just cameras, curated photo ops, and personal brand building.
I felt like she dressed inappropriately throughout the tour. She changed clothes multiple times a day. And you're right, the objective was to look like she was the Princess of Wales, having her multiple meetings throughout the day, different looks, and that's not their status anymore. A week ago, Meghan Markle was throwing jam at her neighbors.
To put it bluntly, Nigeria refused to be used. This wasn't about scheduling conflicts or diplomatic technicalities. This was a stand, a nation saying no to what many are now calling celebrity colonialism, when fame-seeking Westerners swoop into developing nations, take pictures, claim connection, and leave with headlines.
Just went off on these, what did she call them? Queen's husband lying, and she went on Oprah and suggested one or both of them are rage. She couldn't have cared less. She doesn't care about anyone other than herself, and I include Harry in that. She cares about her image. That's why she's there.
Nigeria wasn't interested in playing that game again. Not for Netflix, not for Archwell, not for the Sussexes. And the timing made things even worse. Nigeria, still facing serious internal challenges, economic stress, unpaid civil workers, rising security costs, was being asked to foot the bill yet again for two ex-royals looking for a soft power comeback. The answer was simple: absolutely not. But if the rejection was harsh, it's only because the first visit left such a deep scar. To understand Nigeria's decision, we have to rewind to 2024, when Harry and Meghan first touched down on Nigerian soil. Back then, the headlines were glowing. Royal couple reconnects with ancestral roots. Meghan discovers Nigerian heritage. Harry and Meghan bring hope and glamour to Africa. But behind the smiling photos and curated speeches, the reality was far messier. What many Nigerians saw wasn't a diplomatic mission. It wasn't cultural outreach. It was a celebrity vanity project, one that involved red carpets, staged handshakes, tribal fashion, and an unusually heavy presence of film crews. In fact, insiders say the entire trip felt more like a Netflix special in the making than a sincere attempt to engage with the people or culture. And then came the now infamous moment. Meghan Markle, standing on stage in traditional Nigerian attire, announced to a cheering crowd that she had discovered she was 43% Nigerian, thanks to a mail-in DNA test. Some clapped, others cringed. To many Nigerians, that moment was not empowering. It was embarrassing. The idea that cultural identity could be reduced to a percentage on a spit test felt shallow at best, exploitative at worst. Academics and cultural leaders from Lagos to Abuja were quick to call it out. They accused Meghan of ancestral cosplay, of wrapping herself in Nigerian identity not out of connection, but for clout. One prominent historian put it bluntly: you don't get to wrap yourself in African culture only when it suits your brand. And the criticism didn't stop there. Behind the scenes, Nigeria's security forces were overwhelmed. The Sussexes traveled like royalty, despite having no official standing. Motorcades, luxury hotel demands, media management, security briefings, all coordinated for two private citizens. The Nigerian government was left footing the bill for what increasingly looked like a staged goodwill tour, with no real purpose except to keep Harry and Meghan in the global spotlight. Even worse, many of Nigeria's actual royal families weren't even contacted. They watched as two foreign celebrities posed with hand-picked tribal elders while completely bypassing the real cultural power structures. It wasn't just tone-deaf, it was a diplomatic slap in the face. So by the time their team floated the idea of a second visit, the answer wasn't hard to come up with. Nigeria had seen enough. And yet, the rejection wasn't just about cultural offense. It triggered something even deeper, a global shift in how the world sees the Sussexes. To understand just how badly things spiraled, we need to talk about presentation versus position. Because while Harry and Meghan may no longer be working royals, you wouldn't know it from the way they carried themselves during that first visit to Nigeria. Luxury motorcades, presidential-level security, multiple wardrobe changes per day, Netflix crews flanking every handshake. It wasn't just a cultural tour, it was a spectacle, and many Nigerians saw right through it. The media called it a quasi-royal tour, but locals had another name for it, a royal cosplay. Reports from security officials inside Nigeria claimed the visit was a logistical nightmare. Harry and Meghan reportedly arrived expecting top-tier accommodations, ceremonial escorts, VIP treatment, all the glitz of a royal tour, with none of the responsibility that should come with it. This wasn't a diplomatic mission. There were no state officials involved. And perhaps most glaringly, the British High Commission had zero involvement. That's not just awkward, it's alarming. In diplomatic circles, a visit by foreign dignitaries, even former royals, typically involves months of planning and formal communication between governments. In this case, there was none, no clearance, no briefing, just a high-profile couple showing up with a film crew and a press agenda. And the optics weren't subtle. Meghan, seen in custom Nigerian fabrics, flitted from one ceremonial stop to the next, like she was on a press tour, not a diplomatic engagement. She posed with tribal elders, danced for cameras, and smiled through crowds. But critics say it was all for the lens, not for the locals. One senior intelligence officer even told the nation Nigeria they wanted the full royal treatment without the responsibility or the credentials. It was a self-styled celebrity tour, and it showed. The whole event felt like a production. Meghan dressed to mirror the Princess of Wales. Multiple outfits a day, orchestrated meetings, rehearsed speeches. It wasn't subtle, it was strategic. But to many Nigerians, it was also deeply insulting. This wasn't a country looking to roll out the red carpet for foreign fame. They were expecting humility, cultural respect, and collaboration, not camera-ready royalty roleplay. So when Meghan and Harry later positioned the trip as a heartfelt homecoming and floated ideas for documentaries, memoir chapters, and Archwell-branded initiatives, it didn't land the way they hoped. It felt like the country had been used as a background prop for someone else's narrative. And the message was clear. If you want to be treated like royalty, act like it. Otherwise, don't expect nations to bow to the brand. But if government officials were offended, Nigeria's tribal leaders were furious. In Nigeria, royalty isn't just a ceremonial tradition. It's a deeply embedded cultural system with centuries of lineage, power, and protocol. So imagine how it felt when two foreigners, no longer recognized royals in their own country, flew in, claimed ancestral ties, and bypassed the actual Nigerian monarchs. That's not just a misstep, that's a cultural affront. During their visit, Harry and Meghan posed with a select group of elders, danced at community celebrations, and made symbolic gestures dressed in traditional attire. To the camera, it looked respectful, but behind the scenes, it stirred up real outrage. Why? Because Nigeria's most prominent tribal families, the Yorubas, the Igbos, the Hausa rulers, weren't even contacted. No invitations, no collaboration, no acknowledgement of their authority. One aide from a Yoruban royal household didn't hold back. He told local media they cherry-picked their way through Nigeria's cultural landscape, avoiding the real royalty in favor of what was convenient, curated, and camera-friendly. That's not cultural exchange. That's brand manipulation. And the criticism snowballed fast. Dozens of tribal coalitions filed private petitions to the federal government, demanding that any future visit from Harry and Meghan be blocked, unless processed through proper diplomatic and traditional channels. Their request? No more informal visits, no more self-declared tours, and no more branding Nigeria without permission. One tribal leader even described the Sussex visit as a roast of true royal diplomacy. If they don't want to carry the duty of being royal in their own country, they shouldn't perform it in ours. Another historian put it even more bluntly. This wasn't a tribute to African heritage. This was ancestral cosplay for the cameras. For many, Meghan's 43% DNA claim wasn't a moment of cultural pride. It was tone-deaf and trivializing. Cultural identity isn't something you switch on when it fits your narrative. It's not a costume you wear when the lights are on. That sentiment caught fire. By the time Harry and Meghan floated a second tour, the damage had already been done. Nigeria's cultural gatekeepers were united, loud, and ready to block them at the border. Not out of spite, but out of protection. Protection of heritage, protection of protocol, protection of dignity. But the fallout didn't stop at Nigeria's borders. Hollywood was watching, and it wasn't amused. What started as a cultural controversy soon became a full-blown diplomatic disaster. And not just for Nigeria. The international community began asking the same question. Who exactly gave Harry and Meghan Meghan the green light for this tour, because here's the truth: no one did. Sources inside the British High Commission, the UK's official diplomatic presence in Nigeria, confirmed that they had no involvement, no oversight, and no coordination with the Sussexes' original visit. There were no formal communications with Nigerian ministries, no state approvals, no cooperation from Buckingham Palace. Nothing. In diplomatic terms, that's not just unusual, it's a red flag. Former UK diplomats, speaking anonymously to African and British outlets, described the visit as rogue, unauthorized, and deeply risky. One called it a PR stunt, dangerously masquerading as diplomacy. And when the Nigerian Ministry of Foreign Affairs issued their firm rejection of a second visit, the relief in British circles was palpable. Behind closed doors, multiple sources confirmed that the UK's Foreign Office had flagged Harry and Meghan as a potential diplomatic liability, particularly in regions with sensitive cultural dynamics or post-colonial tensions. Why? Because their titles may still exist, but their status is unofficial. They don't represent the crown. They don't represent the UK. And yet, they still dress the part, speak the part, and travel with the optics of power, often without acknowledging the diplomatic consequences. This is where things get serious. When foreign governments see two individuals leveraging royal symbolism without formal authority, it creates confusion. It risks international tension. And in regions like Africa, where colonial history still casts a long shadow, that kind of confusion can feel like a form of misuse. One Nigerian policy analyst said it best: "They're not royalty here, they're tourists with a PR agenda, and the country wasn't interested in playing along." The rejection sent shockwaves not just through government circles, but through the Sussexes' entire brand identity. Because if they can't secure safe, respectful visits to places like Nigeria, what does that mean for their future as global figures? And even more damaging than the silence from Buckingham Palace was the silence coming from Hollywood. Because when cameras go quiet, the empire begins to crumble. While Harry and Meghan were scrambling to reframe the Nigeria fallout, pitching it as a misunderstood moment, a heartfelt tribute, maybe even a future Netflix special, the entertainment industry was already turning away. Let's start with Netflix, the Sussexes' biggest media partner and the streaming giant that once welcomed them with open arms and a multi-million-dollar content deal. Internally, their team was ready to turn the Nigeria trip into content gold. An Archwell documentary, memoir footage, branded empowerment specials. But then, silence. No trailer, no teaser, no green light. And now we know why. Insiders from Netflix's original content division leaked that the Nigeria backlash was just too hot to handle. There were legal red flags, fears of diplomatic misrepresentation, and questions about whether Meghan and Harry had falsely presented themselves as official cultural ambassadors, when in reality, they were acting without any formal authority. One executive, speaking anonymously to Deadline, said it wasn't worth the risk. The brand hit would be too big. Just like that, the Sussexes' Africa pitch was gone. No documentary, no Archwell special, no diaspora dreams. But Netflix wasn't the only one walking away. In Hollywood, where reputation is everything, the shift was already visible. A-list collaborators began backing off quietly. Publicists who once championed Meghan's narrative started refocusing on other clients. Even brand sponsors, once eager to be seen alongside the modern royals, began labeling them with a new word: uninsurable. That's the kiss of goodbye in entertainment. It means too volatile to pitch, too controversial to sell, too risky to touch. One LA talent agent put it plainly: they bring heat, but it's dangerous heat. And remember, this was a couple once hailed as a global power duo, equal parts influence, elegance, and media savvy. Now, they're becoming a cautionary tale, not just in diplomacy, but in overexposure, underdelivery, and unchecked ambition. Even Beyoncé's inner circle, who once embraced Meghan warmly and reportedly invited her to high-profile events, has gone silent on future collaborations. In an industry built on image and narrative, the Sussexes' brand, at least for now, is starting to look more fragile than regal. But if Hollywood is retreating, what does that say about their long-term global reach? Because this isn't just about Nigeria anymore. It's about the world watching and turning away. If there's one phrase that's emerged from this firestorm and refused to fade, it's this: celebrity colonialism. It's the idea that wealthy Western figures, celebrities, influencers, former royals, parachute into developing nations, deliver a few emotional speeches, pose for carefully staged photos, and fly out with the headlines, the content, and the narrative. They take home social social capital. They boost their brands. They fill memoir chapters and Netflix specials. But what do they leave behind? Not infrastructure, not policy reform, not lasting change. This is the growing criticism surrounding Harry and Meghan's Nigeria visit, and it's coming from scholars, activists, and public intellectuals across Africa. Nigerian sociologist Dr. Femi Dena described it in one powerful sentence: they come with entitlement, no humility, and they expect the world to clap. That era is over, and he's not alone. In the weeks following Nigeria's rejection, Pan-African cultural organizations began issuing official statements, calling for tighter guidelines and stricter protocol for how foreign public figures conduct themselves when engaging with traditional and diplomatic spaces. Their message is clear: if you want to visit, visit, but don't wrap yourself in our identity for your own narrative. Don't perform royalty where you've been stripped of the crown. Don't use our history to revive your headlines, because it's not just offensive, it's manipulative. And this backlash isn't isolated. From Ghana to Kenya, Senegal to South Africa, the skepticism is spreading. These are countries tired of being treated like backdrops for someone else's transformation arc. They're done being commodified and symbolized for Western storytelling. Meghan's 43% DNA reveal may have been intended as a personal connection, but to many, it became a case study in surface-level solidarity. A reminder that even in 2025, some people still see Africa not as a continent full of complexity and agency, but as a setting for a narrative they've already written. And that, more than anything else, is what Nigeria rejected. But as the doors continue to close, the real question becomes, what's left? So where does this all leave Harry and Meghan? Once celebrated as the couple that would modernize the monarchy, they now face something far more ominous than public criticism: irrelevance. The Nigeria rejection wasn't just about a missed trip. It was a turning point, a line drawn in the sand, not just by one country, but by a global audience that's growing weary of performance without purpose. Their brand, once built on rebellion, justice, and reform, is now being redefined by missteps, misreads, and missed opportunities. Netflix is pulling back. Hollywood is going silent. Diplomats are distancing themselves, and a continent is saying, in no uncertain terms, don't come back unless you come correct. It's a dramatic fall for two people who once held the world's attention in their hands. But here's the thing about attention: it moves fast, and right now, the world seems ready to move on. Because in an age where authenticity matters more than aesthetics, and substance matters more than speeches, Harry and Meghan are struggling to find their place. They tried to escape the confines of Buckingham Palace, but in chasing fame on their own terms, they may have built a stage no one's clapping for anymore. And that's the real twist in this story. Not just that they were rejected, but that the rejection resonated. That people across continents, across cultures, looked at a glossy photo op and said, that's not leadership, that's not impact, that's a brand on life support. So what comes next? Will they change course, trade performance for purpose, celebrity for service? Or will this just be one more chapter in a story of what could have been? Only time will tell. But one thing's for sure, the world isn't bowing anymore. It's watching and waiting.